Like most boys my age, 17, many afternoons were spent in my room playing Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto 5 with my friends. This was a typical Saturday afternoon for me. Sadly, this changed drastically because of the secret my family kept from me. I'll reveal the secret later in the video, so keep watching. During dinner one night, Dad mentioned that he and Mom had to go away on a weekend trip, and I'd have to spend the night with Grandma. I'm 17. Why can't I stay home alone? Because you're not 18. This is not a debate. You will be staying with your grandmother. Staying at Grandma's changed my life drastically. I'll reveal how later in the video. You really better keep watching. We arrived on Friday evening at Grandma's. She hugged me and told me there were freshly baked cookies in the kitchen. Thanks, Grandma, I said as I hustled towards the cookies. I grabbed a handful of cookies, and as I headed towards my designated room, I heard Grandma say something that piqued my interest. Dan, you and Laura need to tell him the truth. I know, Mom. We will soon. It's been 17 years. Dad kissed Grandma goodbye, and she closed the door. I tiptoed to my room. I couldn't help but wonder what secret my parents were keeping from me. Early next morning, Grandma knocked on my door and told me she had a few errands to run, and then she had her book club meeting to attend. She said that breakfast was on the table, and she left money on the kitchen table for a pizza. She kissed me and said she'd be back around 5 p.m. After breakfast, I searched Grandma's house from top to bottom for clues. Maybe this was the reason Mom never liked me at Grandma's. I didn't see any weird documents on any box or drawer at Grandma's. After a few hours of searching, I gave up. I ordered pizza and watched some old horror films. That night while in bed, I heard something creak in the hall. I slowly opened my door and peeked into the corridor. Grandma was pulling a staircase from the roof. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed that before. I watched as Grandma walked up the stairs and returned a few minutes later. She retracted the staircase, then went to her room. I needed to get to the attic. I waited about half an hour until I was certain Grandma was asleep before I went into the corridor with my phone in hand. I noticed the little ring on the ceiling and pulled on it. Once the stairs were down, I quickly went up the stairs and turned on the flashlight on my phone. Grandma's attic was spotless, so it was easy to look through the stuff. I saw a small box marked Zane's First Videos with Mom and Dad. There were 3 VHS videos in the box, and I took them. I heard something downstairs and decided that was my cue to leave. I snuck back downstairs, retracted the stairs, and went back to my room. I hid the videos in my backpack before I drifted off to sleep. The next afternoon, Dad picked me up. I kissed Grandma and told her thank you for having me. When we got home, I greeted Mom and went to my room. I hopped onto my gaming system and asked any of the guys if they knew anyone who could burn VHS tapes to DVDs. My brother does it all the time as a side hustle. He charges $2 per tape. How many tapes do you have? Leo asked. I have 3, and I need this done ASAP. Do you think I can bring you the tapes tomorrow and collect them the following day? Sure, no problem. Hey, are you 2 lovebirds finished? We came to play, so let's play, Phil said. The next day I handed Leo the tapes and paid the fee, and the following day I collected my tapes and the DVDs. As soon as I got home, I pulled out my portable DVD player and slipped in the first DVD. It was a man and a woman cooing over a baby who was laughing and giggling. Could this be me? But those aren't my parents. I watched the first 2 videos, but the third video had me shook. In the video, the mom and the dad held baby Zane and told him how much they loved him. They told him he was going to live with Aunt Laura and Uncle Dan. I turned off the player. I couldn't watch anymore. Aunt Laura and Uncle Dan? I quickly called my grandmother. Grandma, there's something I have to tell you. I admitted that I'd snuck into the attic and stole the tapes. I also told her what was on the videos. Grandma was silent for a while before she answered. I hoped that your parents would have spoken to you about this. But you asked, and it isn't fair to lie to you. Your birth parents, Diane and Matthew King, were bank robbers. Your mother, Diane's sister, decided to adopt you as her own since she and Dan couldn't have children of their own after they were incarcerated. As soon as your parents get home, please speak with them. Grandma and I chatted for a few more minutes before we hung up. As soon as Mom and Dad got home, I told them I wanted them to watch something. They both sat on the sofa, and I pushed the DVD into the player. I pressed play and watched my parents' eyes widen. Mom jumped up and pressed stop. Where did you get this? The more important question is, why didn't you tell me you weren't my real parents? Zane, Mom said hesitantly, we wanted to do what was best for you. We live in a small town, and if anyone knew who your real parents were, people would judge you based on their bad decisions. You had no right to keep me from my parents. My parents trusted you, and this is how you repay them? Is this because you couldn't make children of your own that you're keeping their only children from them? Mom looked like she was about to slap me, and Dad immediately jumped up and stood between us. I stormed into my room and locked the door. I was going to find my parents if it's the last thing I did. That night, I searched the internet and saw all the bank robberies my real parents had committed. I found out which prisons my parents were located in, and I decided to visit them. The day I visited my birth mom, my hands sweated profusely as I waited by the table for my birth mom to come out and greet me. I saw a woman walking towards me, and I recognized her from the video. I stood up and greeted her before we both sat down. Hi, I'm not sure what to say, I blurted out. I quickly told her everything, and she listened intently. That's quite a story, but Laura told me that my baby boy died from pneumonia when he was a baby. I can't believe you were sitting here. Well, we can do a DNA test just to be sure. With tears in her eyes, she agreed. I just wish your father was here to see you. He died about 3 years ago. We talked until it was time for me to leave. I wrote a letter to the warden and asked if we could do a DNA test, and he agreed. Once permission was granted, the warden organized a doctor to do our DNA test. I thought this was the end of the road for me. But when our DNA test showed that she couldn't be my mother, I had more questions. She squeezed my hand as tears rolled down my eyes. I hope that you find your mom. I thanked her for everything and left. I locked myself in my room for 3 days. On the 3rd day, I heard a soft knock at the door. Zane, it's Grandma. I opened the door and pulled Grandma into the room and locked it again. I stood there and hugged her for about 15 minutes before I told her what happened. Zane, you need to tell your parents what you found out. There must be some sort of mistake. Grandma opened my bedroom door and beckoned to my parents and retold my story to them. There must be some mistake, Dad exclaimed, confused. While Grandma and Dad tried to figure out the mystery, Mom stood in the room and didn't say a word. Mom, do you know who my real mother is? I am your real mother. I took care of you for the past 17 years, and this is the thanks I get? I repeated my question. Mom didn't answer. Laura, is there something you aren't telling us? Laura, Grandma said. It's been 17 years. Zane deserves to know who her real mother is. Mom's eyes darted around the room before she broke down in tears and confessed everything. One afternoon, when Zane, the real Zane, was about 5 months old, I picked him up from daycare and went to the mall. I'd usually pick Zane up last, but that day I picked him up first. He was asleep, so when I hopped out of the car, I didn't think anything was wrong when he didn't make any noise. After a few hours, I came back and Zane was dead. Between tears, Mom told us that she drove to the bad side of town and took me from a homeless woman who was sleeping. After Mom finished talking, the room had an intense silence as Grandma, Dad, and I tried to come to terms with the news that we just heard. Without saying anything, I pulled on my sneakers and walked out of the house. I couldn't believe I was raised by someone who had kidnapped me. I walked until I got to the pier and I sat on the dock. Everything I thought about the last 17 years of my life was a complete lie. Around midnight, Dad found me and sat next to me on the pier. After a few minutes, I placed my head on his shoulder and he hugged me. Zane, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. I didn't know that Laura had switched you. What kind of a father doesn't know when their baby is switched? If you want help finding your birth mother, I'll help you. Are you ready to go home? How can I face Mom knowing what she did? Mom was taken away by the police after you left. She agreed to give herself up. Grandma is at home and she's very worried about you. I nodded. Okay. The next week, I went on national TV and told my story to the world. I knew it was a long shot, but I was willing to take the chance. Dad stated that a reward of $5,000 would be given to anyone who gave information that led me to my birth mother. Within the next few weeks, I took dozens of DNA tests and chatted with hundreds of people who claimed to have a lead, but they were all dead ends. After about a year, I decided to give up. My emotions took a huge hit, and I just couldn't do it anymore. One day, while Dad and I were home, someone came and knocked on the front door. Dad opened the door, and there was a teenage girl.
Hi, good afternoon. How can I help you?
My name is Brittany Klein. I'm looking for Zane McAllister. Dad called me to the door. Hi, what's this about? I think you're my brother, but I can't tell Mom until I'm positive. Dad ushered her into the house, and we sat in the living room to talk.
What makes you think Zane's your brother?
When your story first came out and Mom saw it, she cried really hard. I didn't understand it at first, but about 3 months ago, she admitted that she was young when she got pregnant and her parents put her out. She said she fell asleep with you next to her. Suddenly, you were yanked from her hands and the lady jumped in her car and sped off.
Son, I know you've been through a lot, but I think you should do a DNA test.
I nodded. Immediately, Dad called the doctor and asked if she could do an emergency visit. While we waited, Brittany told us she was 13 years old and had a 9-year-old brother named Daniel. After about 30 minutes, the doctor arrived. Brittany handed the doctor her mother's toothbrush and the doctor swabbed me. The doctor told us she'd have the results tomorrow and left. She thanked them for their time, gave me a number she could be reached by, and left. Grandma came by the next day to lend emotional support. The doctor dropped off the results at about 2 p.m. Dad looked at me.
Are you ready?
I rubbed my hands nervously and nodded. Dad opened the document and read it.
It says here that you and Brittany's mom are a 99.9% match.
Grandma screamed and hugged me. I called Brittany and told her the good news. Dad and Grandma agreed that tomorrow we'd have a little party and invite my birth mom and my siblings. At 3 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Grandma answered the door, and Grandma led them to the living room where there were balloons and a small buffet laid out. I walked into the room slowly. Mom? The lady turned around with tears in her eyes and walked towards me. She hugged me and cried. I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. After a while, she pulled away. My name is Lucille. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I'm sorry it took so long to find you. When I heard your story on the news, I didn't know what to think. I think we should make a toast to Brittany, the person who made this all possible, Grandma chimed in. We spent the rest of the afternoon learning about each other, and my birth mom told me that she'd named me Tyreek. She stated that after I was stolen, she used that as motivation to get odd jobs and get off the street. Eventually, she found herself an apartment, got married, and had kids. Her late husband passed away about 5 years ago, and she never told him she lived on the street or that her baby was stolen because she was ashamed. Lucille, you were able to rise from a devastating situation, find love, and start a family. You are a woman of strength, and I'm happy that Zane has you for a mother. Grandma hugged her. Grandma and Dad grew to love Brittany and Daniel as their own, and my birth mom became a beautiful part of our family. I'm thankful for my family, and I'll never take them for granted. If you have a family that loves and cares for you, tell them you love them today, because tomorrow is not promised to anyone. Promised to anyone. Promised.